How do I make a post? Oh, I haven't logged in here. Yes. Okay. Yeah. Because some guys there are. You can just Please help yourself. Do we have a microphone?
I don't bring any.
Okay. Could someone check the live streaming? Just one person, not everyone. It's working. Okay. Thanks. Okay. So so everyone, please don't check if it works, but it would be really appreciable if you would share this the link I've sent to the Meetup and to the Facebook event. So if you could share it to your friends whom you think it would be interesting to listen about Rx and Android screens. Marius, I saw Marius. Marius, do we have a microphone? Do you know if we have a microphone?
We don't.
But I think the space is not so huge. It will be sufficient. So I guess we will ask people not to talk in the background during the presentation. And I guess we can start. What do you think, Marius?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so welcome everyone to the Android Meetup at Revolut. We actually are live streaming this event as well. So as I mentioned, please share this link to the event with your friends. Because maybe someone will not fit into this space because we are full house and I think we have sold out all the tickets. And today,
Wait,
sorry?
it's a paid event.
Oh, it's a free event. Next time we will make it paid, I guess.
Smart.
Before giving an introduction to the speakers, I wanted to invite all of you who are developers and not necessarily, but you are all interested in technical topics. And GDG Vilnius is a Google developer community, and we organize events where people can share their knowledge, what they learned, and make it that people around you would know good technologies you tried, some best practices you are applying. Even if you are not pro at that, it's still beneficial that you share it so people would know, and maybe they would learn it themselves online even better. But I think for the initial kick, it's good that people share their knowledge. And GDG Vilnius is a platform where you can practice your public speaking skills, which is, I believe, very useful in your career, because me, as a software developer manager, I believe that good senior developer is capable to communicate his thoughts to their colleagues, to business owners, to project managers, etc. So this is very useful for your personal career growth too. As well, as we talked with Roman and Igor, it opens doors for you to be an international public speaker in little communities in other countries. So you can travel sponsored by the company, as Revolut did for our speakers today. Or Google has this program which they call Google Developer Experts, which they This is a platform where GDG co-organizers are looking for speakers to come to their cities. So we had some GDEs coming from London, for example. I encourage everyone of you to reach out to our team, send a message on Meetup, Facebook, or personally, whatever, and we are always looking for speakers for our future events. Next event will be about Flutter in a week, next week, March 12th. We will have Tadeusz Shidlauskas talking about how to write a production app in Flutter. Without further ado, I want to welcome Roman Iatcyna, who will talk about Rx data flow in Revolut and Redact.
Yes.
So, welcome.
Nice to meet you, everyone. Yeah, I'll introduce myself once more. My name is Roman Iatcyna. I'm working as the lead and build developer at Revolut. And to give a little bit more introduction on how we do things at Revolut, we have around 60 Android developers right now. Our stack includes RxJava, so this presentation will be mostly about RxJava and how we use it and what we are using it for. And for starters, how many of you have any experience with RxJava or any other like functional reactive framework? Yeah, that's awesome, because there will be some terms like streams, which I hope will be comprehensive to everyone who didn't even use it. And so yeah, let's start then. One of the most important thing in the Revolut app is that it supports offline mode. I'll begin with describing what offline mode means for Revolut, and for that, this thing stopped working. Sorry. Yeah. So what offline mode means for an app in Revolut, for Revolut precisely, this is actually the first thing our CEO and CTO checks when the new release comes out. Another point is app is essentially being responsive in London Underground. Users, they don't usually know the term offline mode. It's not being advertised, but it's a huge chunk of yeah, that was Freudian mistake. Just a huge
No
chunk.
worries, it's live streamed, we won't cut anything.
Yeah, this is a huge chunk of business logic, which kind of pierces through all of our layers, of domain layers, of data layers. And that for users, that essentially means that app is being responsive at all times, even where there is no internet connection, and user sees loading dialogues, like proper full screen blocking loading dialogues, only when there is completely no cached data, or user tries to perform some writes or update operation when there is no network connection. So in this example, there is a GIF. I'm actually working on a trading product myself. Since its very beginning, it's finally released for the public now. And on this screen, you can see the stock details screen, which, as you can see, can be fully operational when the cache is available for the app. It can be fully operational in the airplane mode, and that's essentially what it means for user to have an offline mode in Revolut app. And how is it achieved? So I'll begin with how it was done before even Rx appeared in the project. Well, Rx actually has been in the project even back then, like 2 years ago, but in a very simple form of only basically wrapping callbacks. And so this offline mode was a huge chunk of business logic that was spread across all the layers in the app. Any developer could find a logic related to offline in presenters, interactors, sometimes on the view. They can be read as the if-else blocks, checking whether the connection is available. There were also different approaches for offline mode in different parts of the app. In some cases, it was behavior subject. You probably heard of it if you used Rx. Sometimes there were different operators were involved, like on error resume or on cut map to network stream, etc., etc. And all this mess was producing a lot of bugs, and what important is that all these bugs were unique to particular screens in the app. So it was very time consuming to always catch these bugs because approaches were different, and we started to think how to implement it properly, how to introduce some common approach so that the offline modes would be handled in the same manner somewhere in one particular place in the app. And at that point this is an overview of our architecture back then, and actually I think it's the same now. It hasn't really changed. Since then, it's very simple, clean architecture with simple MVP for presentation. We have repositories, which stand for storing data and being responsible for access to particular endpoints on the backend. There were interactors or use cases, or a few other actually patterns 2 years ago. Then there were presenters that were called interactors, and there was a view, which is activity or fragment. So we decided to put this offline logic handling to the repositories layer, so that all the other layers didn't even think about the fact that the app has database, that it needs to show some content when offline. And since we decided to do that in repositories, we started with its interface. Let's take a look at an exemplary trading repository, which gives one method: observe portfolio. It returns a simple observable, which has a portfolio in it, so it emits portfolio values. Portfolio is a object that represents your assets. That's essentially like a profile, but in terms of trading. And take a look at this data wrapper. We'll talk about it a little bit closer. This is essentially a very old pattern called LCE, load content error. It wraps the content, the nullable error, and the loading state. And this wrapper essentially insulates insulates the fact where this content comes from, and kind of relieves the responsibility of treating this content as from cache or from backends for lower levels, like for interactors, for presenters. The only thing they need to think about is whether this content is being loaded right now. For example, presenters may show some small loading dialog somewhere in the toolbar, or whether some error happens. This is also a simple throwable, so it doesn't really say anything about the source of this data. This error might have occurred when the repository was trying to read the database, or it could occur when it tried to query the backend. So we started from introducing this wrapper, and the next question arises: what's the implementation of that observable? Because you might think that it's pretty straightforward. You see an observable, you see what type it emits, and it can be straightforward. But actually, the Rx under the hood are so complicated. So the simple observable contract can be very wildly different depending on the implementation. It can be the behavior subject underneath that never completes, or it can be observable just that completes right after emission of the first item. And we needed to think of the implementation that would provide the cache first, then it would provide the the network value. And when it comes to thinking about networking strategies and caching strategies, there are essentially two high-level approaches. First is network first, and the second is cache first. What that means exactly? Network first strategy means that it's slow and app doesn't try to do anything until request returns some value or error. The average backend request is executed for around 300 or 400 milliseconds. So for a good half of a second, user sees loading and doesn't see any data. So it's slow. Even if app has the cache, it waits until the backend response fails before it shows the cache. And you essentially do not need any UI transitions because the contract between view and the above layers are simple. Above layers are setting only one set of values from cache or from network. The other approach is cache first strategy. That means that if we have cache somewhere in memory in database, we first set cache to the view first. Irregardless of whether we have connection or not, even before trying to execute the request, we set cache data first. And then, only then, we try to execute the backend request, and if it succeeds, we update the data with fresh data. Update the view with the fresh data. What does that mean? That UI, the view, essentially needs the common transition approach, because this will be the default scenario when view gets some data and then it gets updated in a half second. You can't just blink and render the new data. You need some animations. So this approach is essentially a little bit harder to implement, but we, as you may read in our blog, we've implemented everything, every screen with the recycler, with the diffu tool. So we had this out of the box. We had the recycler animations, and we were all set on this front. So yeah, let's take a look at these two situations closer. This is essentially the first approach I described. So either we receive a network or we receive a cache data from, let's say, database. There is no any transition. View gets data only once. And this is our cache first strategy. If we have memory, we first emit memory, then we emit network. If we don't have memory, we emit database values, which are a little bit further on the timeline because database querying takes longer than just reading the memory, and then we update from the network. So the default scenario is that there is some update between network and memory data because it usually gets updated on the backend. It gets updated rather frequently in our case of financial app. And coming further, as you might noticed, there were database and memory on that datagram, and that essentially defined the way we have our caching system, which is essentially two levels. First level is memory cache. We decided to use it as the main cache, and the level 2 cache is storage cache. So level 1 cache is synchronized, it's queried on the same thread. You can literally use just a fields in your class for the purpose of the level 1 cache. And the level 2 cache is storage cache. It's asynchronous. You query your database asynchronously. Once your query is executed, you update your memory cache, and then you never use the storage cache. And when any writes are performed, they are being done to memory and to storage, so that these caches are always synchronized between each other. And yeah, let's take a look at another param in our repository. This is called force reload. So the one thing we wanted to be controlled from the domain layer and from the presentation layer is the ability to explicitly request updated data. In the scenario when we do not even need the cache data, when we explicitly know that we do not need the cache data, we can call force reload, and we are ensured that the only fresh data from the backend comes in. And yeah, let's take a look at how this does behave in the terms of Rx. This is the implementation datagram. If you ever see these datagrams in ReactiveX library documentation, this is done in the very similar manner. So this is the subscriber timeline, which subscribes to the observe portfolio or to observe any entity method. And we are looking at the scenario when there is empty memory cache. So when the memory cache is empty, we subscribe to the database observable, which at some point will emit database value, which gets through all these observables to our initial subscriber. And only after that, our internal implementation subscribes to the network call, to the network observable. In our case, this is a retrofit library. It subscribes to retrofit library, which eventually emits this new network value, which go through all these observables to our subscriber. And then later on, we are also getting updates of this data if somebody else requested an update of this entity portfolio, for example. And this is another scenario when the memory cache wasn't empty. Then we get this memory emission synchronously, and only then we execute a network request. So yeah, and all this algorithm can be described in this UML datagram, and which has actually been added to this presentation only to scare you in terms of it does seem difficult to implement every time you plug in a new endpoint into the app. So you always need to keep this datagram in your mind. You need to, I don't know, copy paste some solution, like some approach with behavior subject, and to implement this in every other repository. This obviously wasn't a viable approach, and we decided to introduce the data observable delegate. This is, by the way, is open sourced. It's available on the GitHub. I will later on provide the link to it. And the main idea is that this data observable delegate essentially encapsulates everything I told you in previous slide. It encapsulates the emission pattern, it encapsulates the tool level cache access pattern, and it all does it in the declarative way, so that you only need to provide these few accessors for network, memory, and storage caches, which are provided in forms of Lambda. It doesn't depend on any libraries. We, for example, use retrofit for network calls and room database for database calls. But if you are able to wrap your network request into a reactive single object, every other Lambda is essentially synchronous. So the only dependency is RxJava 2 library. RxJava 2 library. Another mistake. So yeah, let's go through swiftly through the one example of implementing this data observable delegate. This is using the above mentioned portfolio endpoint. This is service, which is retrofit service, which is probably should be known to every of you. And this is a simple map of this data to the domain structures. So we declare all these accesses. In this case, this is a room synchronous access. This is a simple concurrent hash memory cache, and this is also that very same memory cache. It can be just a hash map, concurrent hash map, and here we just store these values to that portfolio DAO to room, and that's basically it. These two slides implement all those diagrams I mentioned before. They implement the whole offline mode for one particular endpoint, and also they provide an ability to do additional stuff, like for example portfolio. It contains nested entities. It's a usual scenario when the some backend entity contains few nested other entities. It can be I don't know, like a wallet and nested transactions. You can always manipulate with your data as you please on the side of these data observable delegate consumer. And all you need to implement that method in the repository is to proxy this call to this data observable delegate, and basically to proxy every params to it. And further on, you are able to do any Rx styled combining. There are we've implemented a few kind of mirrors, copycats of the original Rx operators for specific data streams. You can combine latest data. It does combine only when content's not null. There is a switch map data with switch maps only when content not null. And you can extract this data differently. For example, you can extract only data emitting all errors when you need to explicitly, this is like the last point, when you need to set this data to the view. And you can, for example, skip while loading if you need to skip cache data. And when you need like explicitly fresh data, you can skip loading. And a little bit about the usage. So this is our MVP presenter. This is the above mentioned repository which observes portfolio, which extracts data. And you do observe this on the main thread, and you set portfolio to the view. The one interesting case is that I mentioned that observable emits synchronously. What does synchronously means in terms of Rx? It's not very transparent. I'll demonstrate this on this slide. Consider this observe repository and subscribe method, and this set portfolio, and this two print lines. Portfolio is set to the view and print line attached. So in case we have cache in our memory, portfolio is set to the view. This line will be called prior to this line. So this set will occur synchronously inside attach method. And when cache is absent, attached first be called, so attach method kind of returns, and so only after a while in asynchronous manner this portfolio is set to the view will be called. And a little bit more on the test coverage, because test coverage is also very important at Revolut. Given that all that flows, all that datagrams are implemented in one single entity, this offline algorithm is hugely widely tested. So we essentially only need to test any additional actions, like I demonstrated above. Portfolio has been saving nested values. You can test the fact that your additional actions are performed, and you can assess that this is sorry, I'm wrong. This is an example of the test for data observable delegate itself. It tests, for example, when we do not call force, we pass force reload true, false, I mean, then network is not queried when memory cache is not empty. So all the datagrams demonstrated above for that data observable delegate are tested in this manner, and you only need to test additional actions like saving nested values. So that's basically it. This library is available at Revolut mobile repository on GitHub. You can take a look at it, post some comments for like directly to the GitHub, or I don't know, you can tweet me with any questions if you have. if you will have later, and if you have any questions right now, you can ask them. We give out, I've heard, cups for best questions. So yeah, that is it. If anyone, yeah, that is it.
Said 60 developers. How many iOS developers?
A little bit more because we kind of lagged behind for a few months, but we are catching up. Yeah, around 16. Yeah, yeah.
What's the most common question you get about migrating to coroutines?
About what?
Migrating to coroutines.
I didn't get any question for coroutines about coroutines previously, but
Okay.
yeah,
that's good.
yeah. I think I was asked once, why don't we migrate to coroutines, and the answer is basically at the best outcome, they will provide us the same after the huge amount of work. They will essentially provide us the same, given we would implement all the necessary operators for channels. It will be only the same. Not unlikely it will be better. So the same at the best scenario. Okay, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm not proficient in Java, but from what I understood in the presentation, which is probably a great presentation, thanks for that. You set cache data to the user, regardless of whether there is network data or not.
Yes.
So, as in like in the non-graph, as you know.
Yeah.
Isn't there a risk? Maybe you explained that already, but isn't there a risk that the user will be shown all the data and not refreshed one? At what point do you actually refresh data from the network?
Yeah, good question. Data is refreshed explicitly. So the current strategy is that user will see only that information he has seen before. So yeah, it can be obsolete. It's not wrong. It's just obsolete when a network appears. It will be refreshed. It's not considered a big deal for now for cases where it's used. So it's not used to. It's just displaying the data. Nothing, not any calculation is based on this data. So, for example, if user sends some money, the current obsolete amount of money and his wallet won't affect the operation. So it's only like read-only cached data, and it's explicitly used only for read purposes.
I'd like to add to that. Does the user get informed whether the data is the newest that it can be?
Whether the user gets informed about what?
If the data is the newest, the one from the network, does the user get informed that it is fresh, it's not obsolete?
It gets informed when the network is not available with the snack bar. So the default scenario is that the data is refreshed. So no, he doesn't get informed. It's like the optimistic, most frequent scenario.
Any human mistakes, which when you send money and he doesn't see that the money has been sent, like the obsolete data. Does that happen?
Yeah, I don't believe any kind of bugs were associated with the obsolete cache, but usually users are able to refresh data kind of. So I don't recall any bugs, any reports considering the caching strategy. So it's probably okay. Yep.
Rx development is quite similar on different platforms like iOS. So does other teams like iOS teams, for example, do they use similar approaches? So is there Rx data version for iOS?
Yeah, there is there is no Rx data version for iOS. There is Rx Swift version for iOS, which is the implementation of ReactiveX. But this is actually a big. I always wondering why it's not so popular in iOS community. But our iOS developers do not use the Rx, so they can't use this approach. And I'm not honestly know why, so they just don't, and it's not popular at all, as I recall, very small amount of developers, of iOS developers I know personally use it or used it
Is
even.
it only? Are you talking about Revolut or?
No, I'm talking in general, like, yeah, in big Russian companies, RxJava is very unpopular for some reason.
I have a question related to this, what you answered. So compared to iOS team and Android team, which uses Rx data, what is the stability numbers? Like, do you think that such Rx data implementation helps you to prevent bugs, crashes during runtime? And what is
Probably
the stability numbers?
Yeah,
you know?
I don't think it kind of. Never actually thought about it. Nobody actually compared the probably the reasons between the bugs in Android
Mhm.
and iOS. I tend to believe that the offline mode bugs I compare with the Android like 2 years ago.
Mhm.
I can surely say that there's less on offline mode related bugs these days. On iOS, I've seen the implementation with the simple callbacks. I'd say it's a little bit more I would say
Bug problem.
overwhelming with the callbacks and
Mhm.
stuff with if then switches.
So what is the stability of Revolut app? Like, is it like
This,
99?
the stability itself is similar. Yeah, it's 99 and 9 on both platforms. I would say yes, and to identify which what
Okay.
it is related to.
But to be clear, that amount is only cash-free percentage of the a real number of issues can be more, because your application just doesn't crash, but doesn't
Mhm.
work.
Okay.
Yeah,
So you briefly mentioned testing your code base,
Yeah.
which is great.
yeah.
So in the presentation, you've shown unit tests.
Yeah,
Do you also do any UI tests?
Yeah,
for
yeah.
your Android apps?
Yes.
And what kind of coverage do you aim for?
we do UI tests for mostly for happy paths of features because well UI testing is more expensive in terms of development and maintaining and even executing on the CI. It's run for like 2 or 3 hours now, and it's not that relevantly big amount of tests. So the UI tests I use mostly for happy paths of features, and we do not track the coverage of UI tests due to some issues with JCoco, with Kotlin. We tried to, but it didn't work, and it actually does. It says not that much of information because coverage is very, I don't know, artificial. Yeah, value. It's kind of it tracks a line as fully covered if one test once clicked on that line, and it considers to be 100% covered. So this number is it's useful in the very early beginning of covering the test, when you kind of need to highlight the areas which are completely not tested. But after some points, it doesn't provide any information.
And what kind of tools can I ask you're using for unit testing specifically? Because I believe for for UI testing. For unit testing, I would believe you're probably using JUnit or
Yeah, JUnit for UI tests. We use Espresso. We have some rather already big framework above Espresso to kind of to more easily express our common screens, common patterns on the screens,
that's cool.
and yeah, stuff like that.
We have this data class.
Yeah,
Yeah. Kind of resembles completable feature.
data completely.
Yeah, it has like this loading, it's like an error,
Is
data.
Isn't the completable feature an analog of the single class? It kind of it explicitly.
Yeah, it has like if it's completed, if it's error, like it has stateful kind of methods, and also like
Well,
results.
yeah, probably. But that data class is just it's data class. It doesn't have any execution logic. It only basically wraps the data that reactive framework provides to it, like this data durable delegate provides to it. It doesn't know anything about loading. It just has this Boolean fields. You can use this data wrapper in coroutines in channels because it's just data class.
But like basically when the data is loaded, so you get like another kind of data class, which is
Yeah.
But can you track? How can you track? Like, if you want to, for example, have a UI state, to some, for example, something is hidden or visible. I know.
Okay.
When you get the data, like when it's loading, so how do you track that it's this element needs to be hidden or loading or somewhere? Like how do you trace
Then
that element to the UI element basically?
so data, for example, data can wrap like the list of, if speaking easy, app displays a list of strings, and data wraps this list of strings, and it says that it's loading. So when the presenter gets this data with the list of strings, it sets the list of strings to the view. It displays the list of strings. If it has a loader somewhere, it takes the loading boolean from the data and sets it to the view. And when the next data is emitted, it basically uses new data from the new emission.
Okay.
Okay, the guy at the corner was first.
Another data class related question. Why are we not using sealed classes?
Sealed classes. Yeah, actually there was a suggestion, but because there would be too many sealed classes, because there is nullable content which can be null or non-null. There is nullable loading which can be not nullable, which just boolean which can be false or true, and there is error which can be null or non-null, and there is too many combinations of these fields, which every of this combination can occur at some moment, and it would be too costly to name this state. It would just produce like a sealed class with I don't know 12 elements. So yep.
Do you cache sensitive data?
Yes.
And is any of your data encrypted?
Yes. Our whole database is encrypted, and most of the shared preferences, as I recall, you can. So yeah, we do encrypt it.
Same as in the database.
Yes, in database.
How do you handle encryption keys?
This is like the simple SQLite cipher from the. Well, this is very kind of general library. Nothing.
Yeah, but you have to still have in app code base some kind of encryption key which you use when.
Yeah, we use Keystore for that.
Oh, Keystore.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Okay, I guess.
Shit, I completely forgot. I need to remember the best questions.
So. Yeah, now you will have to.
We will
give to those
I will
you remember.
I will remember, and we will decide on the on two talks. So
Yeah, and that will give a reason for everyone to stay a bit for the networking session after the event. Marius, are we going to the
Actually,
Revolut
there was.
office for networking,
can I-
or we will do it here? Oh yeah.
There was a little line which I expected someone to kind of to notice. That was saying that the Rx works in some way, but it doesn't actually, with only some caveats. Maybe if someone notices that, or it actually can be seen if you go through our GitHub. If anybody asks me about that, he'll receive 2 cups, I think.
Okay, yeah, so thanks Roman, and now Igor will present about reusing screens in Revolut. So let's give a round of applause for both of them.
Hey guys, thanks. Just give me a minute to prepare.
I think if anyone will want to go to the toilet, it's around the corner, left. Yeah, so while Igor is preparing, we have a minute.
Yes.
And I will fix why the screen is blurry. Interesting.
Okay, I think we can wait for 1 minute or so. Yeah, just give a quick introduction about myself. My name is Igor Ismagilov. I've been working at Revolut around 3 years. Studied at St. Petersburg office, then moved to London. We're currently working on in a market opportunities team, which is like the main goal is to adapt our application for different markets and countries such as Europe, US, Asia, DACH region, etc. Yes, and yeah, today I'm gonna talk about how we trying to not repeat ourselves and write less code and reuse screens as much as possible. So let's start with the real examples. For example, one of the most common screen in our application we call it expiration status, and basically it's represent the status like success or errors of some operation. In that particular case is I created the price alert for GBP currency. But can lead user to the details of the exchange transaction. Also, it has you could have a different presentation with some subtitle. So generally, it's really simple screen. There is an icon, image, and actually it could be image or animation, it doesn't matter. Title with a defined style, subtitle, some secondary action, we call it that, and the primary action, the done button. So no any dynamic content on the screen, and it can be just implemented in one single activity, and we can configure it from outside because we know all the values, and we can pass them through intent, for example, in the text. Also for actions, for actions we can put intents into intent and as well implement in a manner to execute intents for the secondary or primary actions. But what if we have a dynamic content? For example, there is a timer which counts down, and after it reaches 0, we have some button, again secondary action, which does network call to the backend to send the email to the user. In that case, and actually you can notice that the general layout is the same. It's some animation. It's bigger, but it's just matter of size. Title, subtitle, secondary action, primary action, right? So, unfortunately, we can't pass any lambda or something else or timer through intent and say to another activity, okay, do that after counting. So we can just reuse that screen for a lot of cases, and we have a huge amount of such screens with the tutorials, with different promos, etc., which actually combine the static as a dynamic content on it. So how to approach that? Basically, the architecture of the Revolut Android application is based on the MVP. So, and our views as dumb as possible, and the major part of the logic is placed in presenters and behind them in a model or interactors, whatever. So we need to find some way to change that implementation of those components. Let's have a look on one more screen, and this will be like our reference screen on which I try to explain the main idea how we like change implementation of the logic based on some external factors. So yeah, this screen is other screen. It can be looked simple, but actually it's sophisticated screen because depending on the country, the list of that fields could be completely different. The order can be different. The content can be different. The validation also for particular items can be different. So yeah, I put here the address of our Israeli office, hoping that my one user looking that my phone works. Okay, so this is a screen in a registration flow. So basically, when the user just tries to sign up first time to the application, he sees it. But also we have the pretty same screen for card delivery flow. It's almost the same, but there's quite few differences. Okay, let's try to enumerate them. So obviously it's right, it's different here and here. Then it's initial data. So when in case of registration flow, we don't know any others and can just pre-fill the country based on the device locator, right? Any other fields will be empty. But in case of the delivery flow, we already know the user's address and can use it, or can use the last address for delivery of the previous card, for example. Then the difference is a logic by which we are running by clicking on the continue button, right? In the first case, we need to execute some request to the backend right away to update the address on the server and validate it. In a case of a card delivery flow, we can just go to the next step with choosing delivery method, for example. And of course, the main thing is that the context in which both the screens are used to. So sign up and delivery. And actually the context is define the implementation of the logic, differences in UI, and the actions what we need to do on that screen. Yeah, let's try take that screen and implement it differently for both flows. Actually, as Roman already mentioned, we have screens which is fully based on a recycler view, and this screen is that the case. So that means that we have like an adapter which can display different types of the widgets. It doesn't matter for recycler view, like picker, edit text, some just text field or image. In some cases, there could be image as well. So let's define at first the contract of that screen in terms of MVP in our case, and start with the view. So it could have just one method, set items, where we put the list of the list item. List item is the interface which can be like used for in our data is like a common interface. And we have I won't be focused a lot on that, but just bear in mind that our view is completely done. It can represent what we tell to it from a presenter. Then the presenter. I put there only one method. It's attach. It's called on start method of activity or fragment. Yeah, just in sake of simplicity, because we want to have a look on how we use different logic for the initial state when we just open that window, that screen. And our model, it can provide us just others, and in a different implementation it will be different. So yeah, let's start from implementation of our view. So it's activity, right? We need some presenter. Let's discuss how we create it a bit later. Then on start we attach it, and we have implemented method of the view set items. We just set the items to the adapter, and the magic happens. All displayed on the view. Then presenters. It does like view set items, model get address model, transform it to the list of the list items, and send to the view. As you remember, we have abstract methods pattern, just defining some strategy, giving header items, and then address items, and make the header items abstract, and inherit that presenter to make the two different implementations for sign up and for card delivery flow. Will be again injected differently based on the context. Implementation in case of the sign up, it just make the some default address model. In case of card delivery, it uses interactors to get the delivery address. If it's null, then it is the user address. So, what putting all together, we have that we have one activity and different branches, different flows in which it can be used. So, how to choose what implementation to use? So, we can provide, and actually the context we can represent by just a string. For example, let's say it's call it flow name, and for sign up, flow to the sign up, for card delivery, delivery. Right? And based on that value, which can be outside, we can create different presenters and different models. But it's not good, right? First of all, because it's just obviously wrong, and secondly, it's really pain to modularize that application with such uses. You can move the address activity, for example, in some dedicated module, and we use it without putting together knowledge about the sign up and delivery. So, what we did in that case, we hide the dependency which we need by the interface. Let's call it address dependencies, and only what about activity you need to know is that address presenter interface. It doesn't care what the implementation it will have. How many of you use Dagger and are familiar with the Dagger? Okay, nice. So yeah, I just quickly go through the next few slides. We can have a component which like a bridge which hide the dependencies and the implementation from the execution class. extends our address dependencies interface. And we declare here that we have a sign up flow module. When you set up the binding between the implementation and interfaces, and it has some dependencies, external dependencies. In our cases, we have an application component where we have provides for the interactors, repositories, and the other common components. Yeah, this is actually the sign up module which we talk about. And we have the same for the delivery flow, right? Again, we have a delivery component, extends the same interfaces and the dependencies for the address screen, and it has its own module, where we have a different binding for the address presenter and address model. And what we need to do is to move that logic from an activity about the choosing which actually the implementation use to some external component. Here I simply use like an object, but in real life it could be some component also hidden by some interface factory or something like that. Yeah, and here based on the flow name, we create different Dagger components and return it to the activity, right? And here the activity doesn't know about the specific component; it just hidden by the interface address dependencies. But it's not that it, and having that mechanism, it turned out that it's quite powerful to not just configure different implementation for a particular screen, but it allows us to reuse and share the model and the state of the model between the different activities. Let's check that case. When the user clicks on the country picker, we show the another screen with the available list of countries. And how it usually works, when user click on some country, we call, first of all, we call that activity for result. User clicks on the some item, we return that result to the caller activity, and we go through the presenter to the model, update the model. But what if we can share our model between these two activities, and it's really helpful in case of not the two activities, but 3 and more, when we need to return the result from last one to the first one. In that case, in case of one activity result, we had to do a lot of logic to handle that result on the intermediate activities and finish automatically then to pass it to the first activity. So it can be done in the actually same way. So we can define the screen contract and the interface for the model for the chooser screen. Let's say it has only one method, update country. We need to change our sign-up model. So we basically want to use the chooser screen in the context of the sign-up. So now it implements both models, and for the update country, we update our state in that model. Then we extend the sign-up flow component with the country chooser dependencies, and our chooser activity now call the same flow container. We can pass here the name of the flow, sign up or delivery, get already the component hidden by another interface, and use presenter. With actually our implementation of the model which is shared across the activities. Yeah, in that case, we just need to keep the components to not create each time for each activity the new one. Yeah, actually, that's it. Yeah.
Kind of connecting to the last presentation. So basically, the presenters are the ones subscribing to the
model,
repository, or right?
yeah, to the model, interactors, etc.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in our case, the presenters they works as just matters from the main models, like address or portfolio, to the list of the UI models.
And how much like of the business logic is outside the presenter, like basically?
The most logic is placed in models. In my presentation called model, yeah, it's like an intermediate level between interactors. Interactors share and encapsulate the application global logic, but the models is like a flow-dependent logic which can be reused across like different steps of the same flow.
Sorry. Yeah. My question is maybe not so much in relation to the code that you've shown, but like in terms of the UI in general.
Okay.
How do you keep your UI standardized between iOS and Android? Like, do you have like a dedicated like app UI team that is responsible for creating all those components that you reuse across all the views, or do you yourself create them as and when needed?
Yeah, good question. Since this January, we have a dedicated UI team, which is consists from Android, iOS, and designer, and they are working on a design system, implementing and align all our existing widgets to the based one, and do implementations and styling, etc.
Can I have another question?
Yeah.
Usually before having such a team, there's a lot of duplication of the same looking component in the app. How bad is the problem in Revolut with that?
Even before the team, we already approaching the reusing UI widget in the researcher, or just having just custom views that doesn't know anything about the domain layer, but just to have setters and getters with simple types of like strings, child sequences, or like UI related stuff, resources, etc. So yeah, even before the team, we had a dedicated Gradle module for that UI core, where we put major part of that reusable widgets. Yeah. Yeah. Great question, and I think I can give you the couple right away, because that's what I expected. Yeah, you are right. We can do that easily, just to keeping our components in a static. Even it's not static, but it will be in the application scope, and we for sure don't want to do that. And what we actually did, we implemented that container, which received different callbacks from activity as on resume, on pause, on the story, and manage lifecycle of the components automatically. So as soon as there is no any activity which uses that component, it will be removed from the list. Yes.
So about testing, do you have like a presenter level tests?
Yeah, so actually right now the common approach is to just have each class, for example, presenter, model, interactor, repository, and mock every dependencies, and just test that class. We still have, did some experiments to do integration testing between repository and view. So we mock only that two layers, like data and view, and try to test how the presenter, model, and the interactor works all together. But it turned out to be mess with the dagger dependencies, etc. So we chose UI test for integration. I think it's a good question for the
I think there are many questions for you, so I'm going to
any other questions? Yeah, I think that. Yeah. Actually, right now for retail application, if we even want to, it's hard to migrate to something else. But we have a business application, Revolut for business, and here we have a completely different approach with a single activity. And like originally, the business team used conductor to manage that views thingy. But right now they're migrating to their own solution for that.
Regarding the UI tests, so we have probably separate set tests for iOS and Android.
Yes.
Is there like consideration to kind of have a single?
Well, we used to have a single approach. We used to, I don't know, remember, Apple, right? Yeah, to have a single set of the test for both platforms. But then we figure out that it's not fit us in terms of how much cases we want to check in Android, and yeah, we moved to the Espresso and our own.
There's a testing platform called Meetup. I'm not sure if it works with native applications. Maybe it should, because it's based on Espresso and the other for iOS.
Yeah. Wants to check this. Okay. Yes.
How do you handle dimensions of different size devices?
Well, we have again interface and implementation which can provide us, which basically hides from the presenter the how it's called resources device. That class which can give us the width and length height of the screen.
I think in terms of different screens, different sizes of the screens, probably the most close answer would be that we rely mostly on the layout, because usually we just make our views adaptive to any sort of device we have. As I recall, the 320 dps is like the minimum width, and every our recycler view item can be rendered with this width, and usually all UI is just adaptive. Tablets are not supported.
Yeah.
I think they're just kind of stretched right now.
Even on smartphone, we support only portrait navigation.
Another more practical one. Do you have any special handling for font size? We all know that we can increase our font size on the phone. For example, I have 5th Android Little Samsung, and I can increase my font size. And For example, if I go to screen with an image, my font will be extra large. Auto sizing or something, auto sizing not always work very good.
Yeah,
So, and how to test it if it's all fits, works, instead of extra sizes, so you don't handle.
But right now we actually use DP for the text sizes, so
Yeah, not everywhere. Yeah, it's actually kind of a little bit of a mess on the front because some fonts are declared in SPs, some other are in DPs, and when you try to change your system settings, in some cases fonts are different, but again the all layouts are adaptive, so most likely every small element will be fine. It won't kind of get disassembled or anything wrong will happen to it, but the font just be different. We are kind of planning this as mostly accessibility feature because fonts are important for people with accessibility issues, and we even started tracking how many of those people use this font feature to kind of to prove to the design team that we need this changing fonts. So at some point we will support it. I do remember one question. I think that was from the guy from the left about the iOS and Rx data and Rx Swift. Yeah, they cover him. It's actually a very pressing matter. Have anyone figured the thing I told you about my presentation, the one caveated thing? No?
we still have
Yeah, we still one have. We don't have two for the extra difficulty.
yeah. Who was it? Fair enough. Question?
Okay, so one more question about the adapter. When you have several test fields in the same route.
Yeah.
And
That's cover and take up.
and when the test field falls out, how do you handle that?
With paid.
The text
Lots
is
of
displayed correctly.
So the question is how we handle the.
So yeah, when there are multiple text inputs, and you mentioned that everything is based on recycler views. So if not,
I would assume the identity.
they all are they all are identified by string ID. So we kind of
You
determine.
like
Yeah.
this?
Yeah. Do you remember that mess with the edit text?
Well,
For
actually.
default field, you have the same item and same content, and those same items. The content.
Yeah. In terms of view type, they are the same.
Mm.
These are just a view type in the recycler adapter, but there are few instances of that view type. As in, well, you have a few instances of one view type in the recycler view. This is even in general framework, and the other just few instances that are being identified by string IDs, and there is actually quite a lot of work around it. So if you have anything else to add.
No. Yeah, actually the main logic to handle that is hidden behind the delegate class, which uses to handle that view type. It's basically the part of the adapter which applies the creating folder and binding folder.
So each test field would have a distinct ID.
Yeah, because the list item interface, which I showed before, it has one property common for everyone called list ID. So basically, the presenter specified the IDs for each element on the screen, and we can use them to solve that problem with the changing content in the same type of the view.
If you turn off the camera, I can tell a story of a very funny bug related to this.
I'm thinking to like announce the events, future
Okay,
events,
yeah,
and then
sure.
we can
Yeah, I can do it later.
do the networking.
Just not on the recording.
So yeah, thanks guys for these two really great presentations. I encourage everyone to stay a bit for that interesting story Roman is going to share. And before I turn off the live streaming, I want to tell to those who are watching that you will miss the networking. Big part of these events are networking, meeting people who are working in the same industry, using same tools. So you guys share your experience during this little parts before event and after. Future events. Next week we are going to have a Flutter event. Rewrite your app in Flutter. This is gonna be advanced level because the last time we had Flutter workshop, people had some feedback that it was the beginner level. Also, as I always encourage you to start giving technical presentations, and I know it's difficult. It's difficult for me to speak on the stage as well, but to get better at that, you need to practice it. So, but if you need some like experience, there will be an event by developer relations events. I know my friend Oleg is organizing this community, and he has announced this week their first meetup called Code Speak Repeat, and the event will happen at the 30th of March, so at the end of the month. But before that, we will have this Flutter event, so don't forget this. Also, we are going to make another workshop with GDG Vilnius about Google Voice Actions. So stay tuned at Facebook group or Meetup. Oh, actually, I would encourage everyone to subscribe to our Meetup page, where we try to manage amounts of people. So when you register, use that Meetup page to kind of confirm that you are going to come. That would be appreciable, so we could know that everyone will have their seat. Sorry for a full house today and missing the not available chairs for everyone. So I guess that's it. Let's.
Are we going to have some after party drinks or something?
This is not scheduled and not planned, but if anyone knows some bar nearby, we could go there. But that's not planned yet. Like networking here is without.
If you have a quorum, I think we can join.
Yeah, and that we could plan during the networking part here. And I'm going to turn off the camera as soon as possible. So thanks again. Let's give a round of applause and then turn it off.